Hello and welcome everyone to the Alliance for Community Media Northwest Region virtual panel, The Importance of Community News. Thank you for joining us today. I am ecstatic to introduce our guests and panelists. First is Jasmine White, Executive Director of Capital Community Media in Salem, Oregon. And our second panelist is Danny Stusser, publisher at the JOLT, which stands for Journal of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater in Washington State. For today's format, each of the panelists will present for about 20 minutes about their organizations, and this will be followed by a 15 to 20 minutes Q&A session. Please save all of your questions until the end. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the chat. All questions will be covered in the order that they are received. If there are any duplicate or kind of similar questions, I may move on to the next one to save time and try to answer as many questions as we can. Also, when you type your question, please indicate if you are addressing a specific panelist by putting their name in it, or if you would like both of them to answer the same question. Also, for more information, our guests have put links in the chat about their organization and ways to contact them. So check those out. I highly recommend going to their website and emailing them. Thank you so much for joining us. I will start the panel off with Jasmine, who will tell us a little bit more about Capital Community Media.
Thank you, Chris. And I just want to say thank you to the Alliance for Community Media Northwest Region for convening this conversation and convening the panel and giving us the opportunity to chat with friends. We haven't had the opportunity to get together in this region in quite a while. I would imagine a couple of years, and we haven't had any conferences in this area since 2020. Since COVID came around. So this is really a great opportunity for us to chat and share information about what we're doing at our respective organizations. The second thing I want to say is Happy Community Media Day. So for those who don't know, today is October 20th, and it is National Community Media Day. And our colleagues across the country who are working in public access, radio stations, have small papers, are all using this day to share and highlight the important work that we do. And it is not just important for us to do the government meeting coverage and the access to facilities that we provide, but really giving our communities a voice. And for some of those organizations across the country, that voice is the voice of local news and information, sharing that information, creating that information. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about what we're doing here at Community Media and where we see this going for our organization in the future. So I will begin sharing my screen so we can jump right into it. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Chris, can you see my screen? So just to talk a little bit about who we are, Capital Community Media, I want to give a little bit of a background and then let you know where we're going as far as news is concerned. So we are located in Salem, Oregon, which is in the capital of the state. I believe that the former executive director shared with me that he had done an extensive amount of research and that Salem was the only capital city in the country without a broadcast news station. So I think that is still the case, and it is something that we're hoping to change in the near future. So we have three broadcast channels, channels 21, 22, 23, and 322, which is our HD channel, which mirrors one of our other channels. We also share content on our website at capitalcommunitymedia.org, social media sites, and then we have a very exciting new radio station that we're really happy about, and I'll talk a little bit about that too, which is KMWV 98.3 FM. And that is a full power radio station. So we have a couple of opportunities to share information and leverage our information and platforms with the audience. So before we move on, I just want to make it really clear that CC Media is not a news organization, right? So we're a community media organization, and we're looking to develop the news entity within our organization. And it's an exciting time for us, but it's also going to be an experimental time. So we're doing lots of things to prepare us for our future. But what I'm hoping to do today is share some of that information with you, share our vision and our strategy, because I think there's going to be opportunities for all of us in the future to kind of join forces on some of the information that we know and best practices in order to do this successfully. So I believe that one of the reasons we're really having this conversation is because as a community media station, we are basically forced to adapt. And this is basically how we got here. Our access, the world's access to technology has changed dramatically over the past 15 to 20 years. Most of the different icons that you see on this tree on the screen did not exist 15 to 20 years ago, which means our relationship to the community was different. What we were able to provide in terms of access to equipment, access to cameras, access to an actual studio. People have that access and technology on their own now just because they have a phone. And so that means that we have to adapt and we have to find more ways to support our community. And I believe that providing news and information and doing it in a way with the community, not just about them, but with the community, is an opportunity for us to stay engaged and stay relevant in a time where people might not necessarily need us for all of the technology they needed in the past. And I believe that this is our value proposition, right? This is how we can be sustainable, and this is how we can secure our role in the future of community media. So we all know that technology affects the way people think, communicate, and learn. One of the challenges that community media has is that we are often reactive. If someone has a problem, they might come to us for a solution, and we might really do a good job in solving that problem. That was evident during the pandemic. A lot of people realized that they needed us to step in and help support government meetings virtually or to train staff. But I think that this is an opportunity for us to be proactive and create content as opposed to just documenting content. So we take a lot of pride here in CC Media of our government meeting coverage, and a lot of pride in our high school sports and some of our other ability to do really high quality production when it comes to documenting music events and community events. But we're stepping into this stage of creating, where CC Media is going to become the speaker. And so we're going to look at that by actually creating content, doing research, generating stories, and sharing information that way. It's important to note, though, that we are not journalists. We don't have trained journalists in our organization, or we haven't previously, even though we just recently hired our first community news director. But our strength in this community is building community. And we do that through media. And so for us, we want to partner with people who are the professionals and the trained journalists, marry that with our access to resources and our expertise, which is in media, and see where we land. So this slide is really just to show you a visual of how much we rely on new technology and access to that information via that new technology. So all of the things you see listed on the screen are different pieces of technology or different applications that we needed in the past in order to listen to music or play games or having alarm clocks or GPS. Now all of that happens through our phone. And through research, we now know that people are consuming news and information that way too. So for us, it's really going to be important that when we design this community news program, that we can find ourselves in that space and are not just creating content for the channels, but creating news that exists and can be consumed on that platform, on this thing that all of us carry around all day. So a couple of years ago, CCTV went through a rebranding process in 2020, in the middle of 2020. And part of that process landed us to where we are today, which is Capital Community Media. And I think that this is the beginning of where we started to have the conversation about news. So there was some focus groups that happened. There was a survey that was conducted. And what we understand from that information is that news is the number one thing that people in this community are looking for and they want from this organization, which is different than what they wanted from the organization 10 or 15 years ago. So what you see here is our strategy for how we plan on moving forward and developing a news program. I think it makes a lot of sense to go slow to go fast, which means take the time you need within your organization to actually do a community needs assessment and to understand what value your organization can bring by creating that content. As a result of that, the organization rebranded because obviously we were more than television. So no longer being Capital Community TV, but becoming Capital Community Media, and trying to figure out how do we use these different platforms that we have accessible to us to share news and information content. So we have the channels, we now have the radio station, we have social media sites. So for us, we want to figure out how do you create stories one time or create a piece of media once and distribute it in all of these different formats to reach as many audiences as possible. So building strategic partnerships. I'm going to talk a little bit about our partnership with the Salem Reporter, which is a local newspaper here, which has been pretty successful for us. And I'm really excited about it. And I feel like it has the ability to grow and change as we grow and change as an organization. Allocating, and I put shift in quotation marks, resources, because for most of us, budgeting is tight. So we don't necessarily have additional resources to allocate to create new positions and figure out a workflow for how to distribute this information. But we really have to look at our organizations internally to say, how do we shift the resources that we might have been using to do some other projects towards doing community news. And the last is leveraging distribution platforms. There is still a lot of power in our channels. And so it's important that we really understand how to leverage that. So here in Salem, we wanted to look at what is the state of news in this area, and also see if there is a void that we can fill. And so I'll talk really briefly about the news presence that we have in this city. So we have the Salem Reporter, which is, I would consider, a reliable, ethical news source. When I moved to Salem a couple of years ago, when you move to a new town, one of the best ways to get to know that place is to read the papers in that organization, that city, right? So you want to gather the daily papers, you want to look at the news at night, but I didn't find that to be really helpful because we just didn't have a lot of news and information that was accessible to me. So the Salem Reporter, I thought, was really reliable in terms of information that helped me understand this community and helped me understand the culture of the community. It's a daily reporting site, and so they have multiple versions on a regular basis that they will send out. So they have a morning version of stories that they send out. Sometimes they'll have an afternoon version, and they also have an evening news version, and they will send you an email with highlights from those stories that connect to their website. I think that the monthly and annual subscription fees are relatively low. So they are charging people for this information in order to have access to it. It's web delivery only, and all of the content is local. The other paper that we have here is the Statesman Journal, which is a traditional daily paper, which means they still deliver an actual, rolled up paper that they toss on your door every day. They have moved to printing some of those stories or sharing some of those stories on their website, but the stories that are local are very few because they are, I believe, because they're owned by USA Today. So the benefit of that is that you have access to national stories and national content, but it doesn't have a lot of hyper local information, neighborhood level information. And then we have a few broadcast affiliates that are 45 miles away, so they're not very close. And so those are the news stories that you'll see if you turn on your news at night. you'll see information that is mainly about Portland, Eugene, some other places. And if there's something, a serious story that happens in Salem, it might land there, but not likely. So what we're doing here at CC Media to develop our news program is, again, I mentioned, because we are not trained journalists, we decided to partner with people who are trained journalists. And so we're partnering with the Salem Reporter, and we have a show with them that comes on our radio station every day at 7:30 a.m. It's called Behind the Story. And one of our staff will interview a journalist from the Salem Reporter, and they have an in-depth conversation about a news story that is relevant and sharing information that maybe did not make it in the actual story. So we all know that the journalism field right now is highly criticized. So it's important for me, and it's important for this organization to make sure that as we move into this direction, we are creating content that is ethical, that is fair, that is well-researched, that is reliable. And unfortunately, there's a lot of content that exists in the world that people are calling news, and it's really opinion pieces or blogs. So we want to make sure that if we move in this direction, that we're actually being respectful of the journalism field. So we hired a community news director, and her first day in the office was actually yesterday. So she hasn't had a lot of time to jump into the position. But like I mentioned, this is a new area for our organization that we're developing, and she has the very exciting and probably scary job to help me develop this aspect of the organization. So we're really looking forward to that. And we're looking forward to her going out in the community and making her presence known and making our presence known in the community as a reliable news source. We're looking at developing a youth journalism program. I think providing career training for young people is a fundable effort. And we all know that we're always looking at how to diversify revenue. And we have some schools in the area that have some really well-known media programs, and we have some schools that don't have any. So we're trying to figure out, should we partner with the schools that have a media program and that have students that have an interest in news, or maybe we look to fill that void and gap in some of the high schools in the area that don't have a media program. So those are two options that we're exploring. And also, again, leveraging media resources for public discourse. I think that one of the strengths that we have as community media stations is the access. We have access to channels, we have relationships with people in the community, we have relationships to government, we're experts at training. We've been training people on how to use cameras, how to edit. So I think that if we take all of those different strengths that we have and put it towards developing a community news program, that's a good opportunity for us. The other opportunity for us is, because the journalism field right now is so highly criticized, people are looking for reliable information, and corporate funded news can be problematic for some of the reasons that we see now, is that most of our news sources and news stations and newspapers are owned by maybe 6 companies across the country. So having that diversity of thought and making sure that that's present is hard to do with corporate media. The other option is government funded media. And with government funded media, you have some other obstacles. Government funded media can become propaganda for public officials. And so you really don't have the opportunity to have unbiased information. So I think that those two obstacles actually create an opportunity for us, for community media, because we're not corporate funded and we're not government funded. So I think that building community trust is possible. And particularly if you create opportunity for people to work with you to share stories, to understand why you're creating this content, that it opens up the possibility for some reliable information that people can really trust and believe. And that's really hard nowadays. And one of the things that I like to tell people about journalism and why it's so important to us and so important to our future is something that I learned at the museum many years ago, is that journalism is the only career field mentioned in the Constitution, right? So freedom of speech and freedom of the press is so important to our democracy. However, we've gotten to a place where we've moved away from people having access to that. So I think it is important for us to figure out what that looks like in the future and figure out how do we make sure that we can have this civil discourse and government accountability and hyper local neighborhood level information. And for us at Salem, I think it's a huge opportunity because we don't have it. So if we can find a way to fund it long term, then I think it's a great opportunity. And I'm going to stop talking now and pass it back to Chris so we can have some time for questions and answers and for him to toss to our next speaker. So thank you guys for your time. Excited to answer some questions after Danny.
Thank you so much. That was really great. I really appreciate the presentation and learning more about it. Just a reminder to the guests, like I said, if you have any questions, you can start putting them in the chat. And if you want to address one of the panelists, just make sure to say that in the question, or if it's a question, if you want to ask both of them, then just specify that. So I really appreciate that. Next up, we have Danny Stusser from the JOLT. So Danny, take it away.
Well, hello, everybody. I am reflecting on Jasmine's introduction. I've got to say, until a couple of weeks ago, I'd never heard of the Alliance for Community Media, and I wasn't really sure what it was. Once Robert Cam explained it to me, it made perfect sense. In other words, I'm not one of you guys, but I think we're working in the same direction. We started what's called a hyper-local online news organization 2.5 years ago. And during that period, we've grown to the point where we are the leading creator of local news in Thurston County, Washington. Thurston County is located about an hour south of Seattle, and our three biggest cities are Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. When we were searching for a name, I almost called this thing Thurston Digest. And a friend of mine slapped my wrist and said, "Don't you dare, go back and get a better name." So we're the JOLT, the Journal of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. Our highest priority is to cover public meetings. Public meetings are what I think community media often covers. The difference between what we do and what you do is that pretty much everything we do involves typing words into a computer. We don't produce video. We sometimes can incorporate video if it's supplied to us, and we can include it in our content management system, which is what you see when you come to our website. I had not been a journalist in a long time. I was news editor of my high school paper. But in more recent years, I was the owner of an advertising-supported print publication. And I was fortunate to have 15 years to build relationships here that have enabled us to stay in business, even though we're not sustainable yet. I think it would probably be useful for me to show you our website. And before I do that, I'd like to point out that there are a couple of organizations that helped us launch. And if you're interested in creating a local news department in your organization, if you're a nonprofit organization, I strongly urge you to go to the Institute for Nonprofit News. That's inn.org. And if you're interested in producing news online, go to the Lion Publishers. Lion is like JOLT. It stands for a longer series of words. Local Independent Online News. We're online news. I don't know that I promise that we'll never print, but currently we're in the business of printing on our website. Everybody on this call likely carries our printing press. It's one of these horrible things. And so I can't do a demonstration of our mobile site, our handheld site, but I can show you our desktop site. And frankly, it's an easier presentation. What we found, in case this is of any interest to anybody, at first about 70% of our page views were mobile. And now it's about 80%. I'd like to think that there's a continued need for desktop as well. So at the click of a button, I'll share my screen and show you our site. Everybody see that? This is our home page right now. These are the stories we published yesterday. And they cover Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, Thurston County, the Port of Olympia, 3 school districts, 4 police agencies, and feature stories about all kinds of things. Who knew that it was Hindu American Awareness Month? I didn't know. Now we know. Some of these are more interesting than others. We're fortunate to have 5 columnists, 1 for each weekday of the week. Some of them each bring their own audiences. Sometimes the people who read the columns don't read anything else, but we have a chance to present our other headlines to them when they come. The top stories are in reverse chronological order from the top. Here's some more stories that are in reverse chronological order. Here's how you can subscribe to our daily newsletter. We publish once a day at about 7:30 at night. And some people think we're an afternoon publication, and probably more people think we're a morning publication because they read it then. We also have the ability, and we separate content by city. Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. You might say that each of them is big enough to have a super hyper local publication, but our cities are stitched together. You don't know when one ends and the other begins unless you're carrying a map. So I thought it was important when we started to include all 3 cities and the county itself. So this is what our homepage looks like. If you click on any story, you'll see sometimes multiple images. This story has 1 image that's put together in a panel of 4. We're partly supported by advertising. Our budget next year, it targets for us to bring in 1/3 of our revenues from advertising, 1/2 of our revenues from local philanthropy, and what's left from that, about 1/6 of our revenues, we anticipate coming from some kind of foundation grant. When we cover a story like this, we go back into our archives, some of which are quite deep with 10 or 20 stories in them, and we publish a link to the related stories. Another feature of our site that is, I think, of increasing importance is our calendar. Calendar of events can be seen a number of different ways. We have a reporter who works about 2 hours a day gathering calendar information or compiling it into a standard format. Not exactly a standard format, I'll show you. So this is all of the activities that we've identified for today. And this is tomorrow. The calendar can be sorted by month. So the remainder of the month, you can see how many events are happening each day: 14, 10, 6, 10. We cover a lot of things throughout the month. I'll show you a calendar item just because I want to give you an idea how a journalist looks at events. Each of our events is a full story. It can have multiple images. Because it's an event, if it's a live event, in-person event, we can put a map showing the location of the venue. We can run up to 1,000 words arbitrarily about the event, provide a link so that people can find out more information from the organizer, provide cost information, telephone information. This is a lot more than you see in most newspaper calendars. Most newspaper calendars will devote 30 words. And of course, you can't put a hyperlink in a print publication. We have several hyperlinks in each of our calendar items. And in addition to putting events that are entertaining or fun events, we include in our calendar all of the public meetings. And we try to put information about the agenda. This is a shorter one than many of our calendar listings. But we want to help encourage people to participate in the democratic process. And that means voting. We encourage people to vote. We help them. And we also provide links to make it easy for people to attend meetings, especially the ones that are online. This week, we're covering approximately 20 public meetings. So this is the Tumwater Public Works. This is the Lacey Hearings Examiner. This is the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners. There's no school board. There's no school board meetings this week. But as you can see, we're covering a lot of public meetings. We help people understand what happened at each of the public meetings. This is the first time I've been on television since I was 10 years old, and I was on the J.P. Patches show. So when I speak in front of Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs, usually I go about 10 minutes and people are raising their hands asking questions. At this point, I think I'd like to rearrange your agenda just enough so that we can handle more of the questions that I anticipate are coming. How's that sound, Chris? Or was there something you wanted me to cover that I didn't cover?
No, I just wanted you to, talk about anything that you think is relevant or people should know, or anything that they can, interact with and, learn more about your organization.
Well, I've been doing it for 2.5 years, so there are probably more things I could ramble on about. I'll tell you one more thing, and without prompting. I wrote the plan to do this in 2011. And when the pandemic happened, it kind of said, okay, did you mean it? And I dug out the plan in March 18th, 2020. And I discovered that the plan from 2011 wouldn't work in 2020. So we wrote a new plan. The way we produced that plan was editors and publishers around the country graciously gave me their time. They convinced me that my old plan wouldn't work. They convinced me that some of my crazy ideas about citizen journalists wouldn't work because they'd been tried before, and persuaded me to create a budget that made sure to pay our journalists. If you want free content, invite people to write about what they care about, and they'll write editorials for you. If you want hard news that's research, news that presents more than one point of view, you need to have a trained journalist write that stuff, whether it's for delivery on a website or on television. There, that's my little speech.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to present.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't see any questions in the chat currently. Does anybody have anything that they would like to ask? And if not, I have a couple questions lined up as well. So
I have a question for Danny.
yes.
So thank you for the presentation and the insight to what your organization is doing. I think it's really exciting. And I just wanted to correct you really quickly. You are one of us.
Thank you.
I agree.
Even if you're not a member of the Alliance for Community Media, we consider you a part of the team and the family, and doing the work that we're doing in terms of providing this important community information and holding government accountable and sharing that information. The question that I have for you is, how has that been received from the government entities that you're actually covering? Because you mentioned that you are providing commentary. So when we are covering a government meeting, we're just recording and broadcasting the meeting. So we're not interviewing people in the community about any of those decisions. We don't interview and we don't talk to government officials about those decisions and how they affect the community. We're really just broadcasting it. So I was just wondering if you could share what your response and reactions have been, because you guys are providing more than just information on the decisions, but commentary as well.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be one of you. And I think we're very closely aligned, but I don't know how to run a camera or any kind of the gadgets like I see in some of those little windows there. We don't provide commentary about every story or topic. We invite readers to comment. So we write straight news and publish it, and then all of our news stories have comments open. I hope we can continue to do that. Only once have I had to delete a comment that was inappropriate. We also, in addition to the straight news that we produce, we publish the commentary of people in our audience. And we have a couple of people who write regularly, sometimes well-researched stories about topics like homelessness or healthcare. People with topical knowledge, we accept their materials with gratitude and we run them. But we clearly label them as editorial. And we put a disclaimer at the bottom of the editorial that it's their opinions and not the opinions of the JOLT. Because we're a nonprofit organization, we are officially nonpartisan. We are very careful to not endorse candidates. We are closely aligned with the League of Women Voters here, and we take their materials and put them on our site, sometimes verbatim, sometimes live, not live, but we take their recordings from Thurston Community Media and we embed them in a news story. So with one click, people have access to the Thurston Community Media recordings.
Thank you. That's great. I appreciate that question, Jasmine. I do see a hand up. I'm going to from Jory Kramer, and my apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly.
You got it in one. That's
awesome.
Exactly. So, thank you both very much. I really enjoyed this. Jasmine, you are living my dream right now. I am with Fort Collins Public Media, and basically that is exactly what I would love to see happening with our group. If it's not too invasive, I was wondering if you could share a breakdown of you said that you are shifting your funds around, you're reallocating funds. Do you have a breakdown of like Danny gave? And then Danny, I've got some questions for you because I like your calendar and I want to talk about that a little bit. But Jasmine, if that's like I say, I don't want to get personal, but I do want to get personal.
That's fine. We're all family here. So one of the things that we had to do as an organization is take a look at where we were putting our organization resources. And for us, we were using a lot of staff time on producing high school sports and high school music events. And both of those things were resource intensive in terms of the amount of bodies that we needed. We also needed a combination of staff and volunteers in order to have something that the return on investment, the community, there are aspects of the community that really do appreciate it, but don't necessarily have a long life on our channels and was not moving in the direction that the board wanted the organization to go into, and that the community, the larger community, had indicated that was important to them in the surveys that we did. So we looked at the organization structure and made some changes within the structure in terms of positions. We're looking at how to do cross-training with our producers so that we don't need as many people doing the same work. Previously, we had individual producers that were assigned to, one person was assigned to high school sports and live music events, one person was assigned to city council, another person was assigned to doing Marion County government meetings. So we're looking at how to make some of those changes to see, can we do cross-training so we can have fewer people working on those projects and then create a new position, which is how we got our community news director position. So we had to look at those positions and make changes in terms of how many people we have doing the same job so that we can create a job for someone else to do. But we're looking at growing that department, right? So we've written in a couple of new positions, I believe a digital media specialist. So we're looking at expanding the organization in that area, while still trying to figure out, can we continue to provide the government meeting coverage? Can we continue to do some of the stuff that's important to our partners that are at the schools, with expanding as well? And it's not easy, it's a challenge, right? Because at the end of the day, you are looking at numbers and you're looking at a budget, and we can't do everything. And so one of the challenges that we have is looking at getting additional funding. So we've created a fund development strategy with the board so that we can have specific targeted goals to raise money for this work. And then making sure that we're, again, populating the channel, since that's really where our funding comes from. So those are all of our obstacles and how we're trying to approach them.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And if anybody, I don't want to take all the time, but I did have a question on the calendar for Danny.
Absolutely, yes.
Can I? Okay. Danny, on your calendar, do you, like on our calendars here for our newspaper, we have to upload our own graphics and our own text, and I think we're allowed up to 2,000 words. Maybe it's only 1,500, something like that. I never hit it when I'm uploading, and I'm a volunteer with the League of Women Voters too, so yay, I was glad to hear that. But at any rate,
me too.
I was wondering, so you said you've got a reporter, though, that takes care of your calendar. So does that reporter find the events and create the copy and find the graphics, or is it a combination? Or that's
right.
My question.
Probably half of the non-government events are fed to us by email, or even by people who enter the calendar themselves. So our system enables anybody with an account on our website to be able to load their own calendar item. It doesn't get published until somebody reviews it. The other half or third are events that our reporter researches, and she writes about them, she verifies that they're happening, and she solicits a graphic if needed, and writes it up and puts it up. So it's journalism, but it's different kind of journalism. We don't need more than one source if it's a trusted source. And we can take that information in our calendar. Every item has its own searchable URL. We can take the information and propagate it out on social media, which we do for about a third of our events. And what's the last thing? Our calendar system looks like our news system, but they're really separate products that are back to back. So our calendar system, if you like it, you can license it and bolt it onto your website. You don't have to be using our entire content management. You don't have to use the news side of our content management system to be able to license the calendar. And our calendar comes from Creative Circle Media Solutions. They run websites for about 300 newspapers around the country, and they've been great. So what some smaller news organizations like ours do is they tinker around with a WordPress site, or they use another kind of site because it costs $50 or $100 a month. And I said to myself and to the board, I never want to learn HTML, and I don't want to have to worry about downtime on our website. So we work with a great hosting company that specializes in news organizations. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate both of you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your questions and the feedback from both of our guests. That was really great. Does anybody else?
I have an answer to a question that was asked earlier, and I didn't answer it.
Yeah.
The question was, what do the government agencies think about? Was that for me? Mm-hmm. That was for me. What do the government agencies think about our coverage? In general, I don't care. I often don't know. And what I care about is that they read the JOLT. And they read it if we quote them accurately and we write stories that are not misleading. Fortunately, we have good relationships with our various governments, the three cities, the county, the port, and the police agencies. We talk to them, and they're often helpful. A couple of examples of stories that we've covered that they didn't like cause them to comment and sometimes ask us to make a correction. We're human, and sometimes we write something that's a little bit incorrect and we fix it. And of course, we always notate on the story itself the correction. Right now, we have a potential merger of two fire departments, and we've written about 14 stories about this. And because of the coverage that we've been making, they're changing some of the aspects of what they're going to propose to the voters. And I expect that there'll be another 7 or 8 stories before this ever gets to a vote, maybe another 10 stories. But it's very complicated, and we try to not simplify it, but explain how complicated it is in simple terms. I think if they had their preference, this would be one of those things that they would wish they could just propose and not have a lot of media coverage. And when I think about this series of stories, I realize that that's why we're here, is to shine a light on what's going on in these obscure government committees and commissions and councils. I hope that answered that question.
Yes, thank you. That's very informative.
I could ask a question that I get asked when I go to the Rotary Club meetings.
Yeah.
Great. How do you get your news out there? And Jasmine touched on this some. We have Facebook accounts and we have a Twitter account. We're beginning to explore using Reddit because people who use Reddit like to debate issues. We're also beginning to explore how we might make use of Nextdoor. Nextdoor is where some of the dumbest stories and some of the most brilliant stories from people in the public, they come out. Some people write screeds and some people write beautiful essays. And the people on Nextdoor, when they see a story that they like or they appreciate, they tell their friends. And we get more subscribers to our daily newsletter. When we go out in public, the most important thing we do, besides introducing the JOLT, because after 2.5 years, still probably only a third of the public knows about us, we sign people up right there on a clipboard on paper. We sign them up to receive our daily newsletter. And it's through that daily newsletter that we have an opportunity to remind people of our presence, to give people the headlines. Our experience is that more people open the newsletter and read it and don't click on anything because they're satisfied with the headlines. On the other hand, some people do click on the stories, and it's more effective than Facebook. It's more effective than Twitter. It's more effective than any of the social media. Maybe I should tell you the bad news about local news. Mm-hmm. Bad news is you can have a great website, you can have excellent social media relationships with readers, but what really propagates the news are aggregators. And aggregators are organizations like businesses, like Newsbreak, Smart News, Microsoft Start, Google News. These organizations take your headlines, take your photographs, put them in their own newsletter, and they send out 2, 3, 4, 5 newsletters a day, trying to get people to click on their site. Excuse me. And there's 2 ways the aggregators work. If you'll play, and we're not right now, they'll take your story, your entire content, put it on their site, wrap their ads around it, and then share a small portion of very low CPM. So one of the aggregators who had been sending us 50,000 page views a month. They had a little conversation with us that went something like, nice little website you got there. Be a shame if anything happened to it.
What?
And well, they didn't say that. What they said was, we can't guarantee that we'll continue to send you 50,000 page views a month. And what they did was they tapered back because I didn't sign their agreement. Their agreement was to take our 50,000 page views and they would give us approximately $300 to $500 a month. Well, the extra 50,000 clicks, the extra 50,000 page views translate to somewhere around 200,000 ad presentations, because each time you show a page, you'll show somewhere around 3 to 5 ads. Depends on how long the story is. And so I didn't want to give up the opportunity to sell as many as 6 or 7 ad contracts for $300 a month. In private conversations with other publishers, they have other names for the aggregators that I probably won't use here. But you can see that what they're doing is taking your work and presenting it to their audience and not paying you for it. This is part of why there's a bill in Congress that would force Facebook and Google to pay some news organizations. We're barely large enough that we would qualify for any of the money that would be proposed. We're talking with a couple of the aggregators to see if their offer is a little bit better than the one that we turned down. But the 50,000 page views that we were getting in June was 14,000 page views in September. So you can see where it's going. And we can't backfill fast enough with Facebook and other social media. So that's the bad news.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's wild, but it's definitely, things like that can be unpredictable out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult in small communities to build an audience because there's no common way to reach everyone. We can't afford to buy billboards. We certainly aren't welcome advertising in the legacy newspaper here. And so we use a variety of guerrilla methods to reach people.
That makes sense. One question, if anybody in the audience has a question, raise your hand or you can type it in the chat, because we have about 5 minutes left. One of the questions I had, just for both of you, is what are each of you think are some of the more like influential or powerful or impactful technologies to come out that you think like impact community media and community news? I know, Jasmine, in your presentation, you mentioned a lot of those things. Do you have any one like technology, whether it's a software or hardware product, that you think had like a really big impact on the field?
I'd have to give that that's a hard question. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's just fine.
I have to give that some thought. I mean, I've been taking copious notes. Danny shared so much that we can learn from and that
Yes.
we can, do here. So I think that I just wanted to say thank you to Danny for sharing all of that information.
Yes.
A lot of stuff that we don't know because we're just getting started. So I don't have a specific technology that I know of right now. So I'd have to give that some thought.
My answer to that question would be Otter. But we're like newspaper people whose printing press is in your hand. Otter AI is a service that lets us interview people and it transcribes simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes the transcription is better than other times. But that service is the last one I would give up.
Nice.
There's a few others we use too.
Yeah.
Do you want me to ramble on?
If you have like have a couple like our other ones that you just want to mention or give a shout out to, and then I think we're ready to wrap up after that.
Okay. Probably the second most important one for us is Grammarly. Grammarly helps us clean up our language and get our editing done faster.
So I have a question for Danny since we're wrapping up. Since you know what stage we're in this organization and the very beginning stages of trying to develop a community news entity that has some impact, and I'm sure that you guys learned a lot and had a lot of mistakes along the way and a lot of valuable lessons. Could you just share a really positive thing that happened, maybe like a great impact that you had from a story that originated on your website, and also maybe like a really tough lesson that you learned that we need to be mindful of and to be aware of?
Well, the toughest lesson I learned is that we didn't raise enough money before we launched. I tell you what, there's one story we wrote that had quite an effect. And this, if I could share screen, I think I could show it to you. Do we have time for that?
I think so.
Okay. So I just have to.
Quick question to our production team. If we happen to go a minute over, is that okay? Or is it going to do a hard stop? You're good? Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay. Yeah.
We published this story about a month ago about an organization that nobody had ever heard of, a very tiny political entity called the Drainage Ditch District. And they have a clogged ditch. And they wanted to take dynamite and blow it up without regard for the fact that there were an endangered species there and a couple of endangered species. And they felt that they had eminent domain over neighboring lands, and they were ready to do this, and they didn't have the right permits. So our reporter made 20 phone calls, maybe 25 phone calls to different state agencies, interviewed people who are in a position to say what the law is, and in a position to say why the frogs needed to be protected. And both the city adjoining this location and the county have put the clamp on them. So we had some effect. There's other stories where we could show impact. It happens right now. It happens only about every other month that we can say we helped with that. And I'm happy to say that we're beginning to see it a little bit more often than we did in the beginning. Thanks for asking that, Jasmine.
Yes. Thank you so much to both of you for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists, everyone for joining us. I also want to give a big, gigantic thank you to our production team that's led by our board member, Robert Cam, out of Thurston Community Media in Olympia. Thank you for doing an amazing job with today's event. We could not have done it without you. If you want to learn more about the organizations today, I'm putting there that info. I just put that in the chat. So there's Capital Community Media, the JOLT, Thurston Community Media, and then also the ACM Northwest region. You can visit our website, or you can email us at acmnwr@gmail.com. Please note that we are currently in the process of updating our website right now. So if there's any old information or any things like that, then we are looking forward to having it be up to date soon. So yes, and reach out to us at any time. Thank you again for everyone for presenting and participating. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.